My confirmation name was Darius. I went and found a Saint Darius because at that point in time, I was so enamored with Darius Walker and what he was doing for those Notre Dame teams of the early aughts that I thought, I must make this man a part of my life forever. So my full name in Catholicism is Michael Louis Darius Golic.
Welcome back to the Echoes podcast. I'm Jessica Smetana. He is Mike Golic Jr. We are here every week on Tuesdays to tell you about Notre Dame football, Notre Dame athletics, everything you need to know about the Fighting Irish. Like, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us. We've got some good reviews, Mike. We've gotten some nice things. We'll read them at the end of the episode, I think. But last week we were saying camp is back. Camp has started, preseason camp. This week we have even more news. The beer coolers have arrived on campus.
Oh. Jess, let me tell you, we'll get to, the quarterback battle stuff, our gigantic secondary, the running back room, everyone loves, like all that stuff. But Notre Dame fans this fall, I have to imagine, are pretty jazzed for this. As it was announced, back in April that they were going to start selling booze here, Compton, and at Purcell for basketball games. So exactly. The coolers are officially here. It's getting real for everyone now, which, Jess, I mean, this is an area I have to defer to your expertise because I found out very quickly after my playing days, I was out of my depth when it came to tailgating and everything that went on around the games because I had been busy trying to play in them. For this, how big a game changer is this for the entire Notre Dame fan experience going into game day?
Well, it's a huge game changer. So obviously, I know you've sat in the what is it called, the upper level box club level.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a name for it. I can't think of it. But anyways, you've sat up there before, and there is alcohol provided. But for us in the lower bowl, Mike, in the bleacher seats, no beer sales, no wine sales. And I remember like 10 years ago going to a Boston College game, another Catholic school. And I was like, they sell wine here. They sell beer here. When is Notre Dame going to get with the program? And with a lot of things at Notre Dame, sometimes it happens a little bit slower. But I can say I'm so grateful that they finally made this choice so that everyone can have access to beer sales. I think it is a very smart move. I think, I'm guessing, this is total speculation, the administration saw the hype of the first home playoff game against Indiana back in December, and they were like, wow, we made like $20 million from this playoff run. We could have tripled that if we sold beer that night because it was so cold. Everyone would have been getting their buzz on, Mike. So obviously drink responsibly. However, this is a huge deal. This is a huge deal for us fans.
Yes, big time. Not since the Jumbotron coming in as the home field atmosphere for Notre Dame got as big a boost as it will coming off this. And just to your point about the drinking responsibly, plenty of people have talked about the fact that like having this available in the stadium means you don't have to go out there in the parking lot and load up before. Like, my God in heaven, I will never forget my first game back to South Bend after I was done playing when I had a chance to go out and tailgate. It was a night game. I don't remember who they were playing, because by the time it was probably 45 minutes till game time, it was like I'd gotten punched right up the face. I looked at my friends and I was like, I see why all of you guys used to leave at halftime of our games to go home and hit a net before we go out the night after, because this is exhausting trying to go out there and go and have a few pops because you can't drink on the inside. So maybe it slows down some of that in the parking lot, which is always a win in terms of the responsibility factor. But in terms of the atmosphere in the stadium, fired up for this one.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet what the sales will be. I imagine there will be a Guinness. I imagine there will be some themed choices for Irish fans. But yeah, this is a big deal, Mike. You obviously have never, as a fan in your student career, had to deal with the alcohol issue of like, do you smuggle in a bottle in your coat, or what? Are the ushers going to catch me? Am I going to get what was it called? Community standards when I was there, but there was a
Res Life.
Res Life. Yes, thank you. I couldn't think of it. They changed the name of it my sophomore year, but
wait, they rebranded Res Life to try and make them seem less like the feds on campus?
The Office of Community Standards, I think, my sophomore year. I don't know if they still call it that, but yes. And I vividly remember, Mike, in 2012, the pit game that we mentioned we've already mentioned in one of our episodes, because it is one of the most like infamous home games of all time. The Notre Dame pit game in 2012, half of my family is from Pittsburgh and went to Pitt, and the other half of my family is from Chicago. But every year when Notre Dame plays Pitt, we all get together for the Notre Dame pit game. It's like a big family tailgate thing. And my cousins are like in their 50s, Mike. They're adult men, and they were in town in South Bend for the Notre Dame Pitt game that year, and ended up being a crazy game, way crazier than it had any right being for
Yes.
for that season. And I
Oof.
remember getting a text message in the third quarter when things were starting to get a little crazy that all of my 50-year-old cousins had been ejected from the game because they smuggled in flasks and were drinking out of flasks right in front of the ushers, which
Oh.
like you can't get away with anything in front of those ushers. So you guys are idiots, but they had to watch the end of that game, including the overtimes, all of the craziness from O'Rourke's across the street because they were dumb and got kicked out of the stadium. So no more. I mean,
No?
now you don't have to do that, and nor should you have ever had to do that.
No. So shout out to the 50-year-olds running rampant through Notre
Block of
Dame Stadium.
shaming to O'Rourke's.
Right, who have to go out there and operate like college kids trying to smuggle booze in or use a fake ID. You are now liberated from that. To your point, Jess, I'm sure we're going to get plenty of Guinness, Teeling stuff in there. Like Notre Dame's going to, I'm sure, brand the hell out of this. And I feel like a lot of stadiums have done the deal where they've soft launched this in the premium seats. I think LSU did that a while ago in Death Valley. And then people end up popping the governor off that thing and letting it go because they all see the money there and the opportunity. And so Notre Dame now joining that chorus, which will be exciting. We've come a long, long way, Jess, in that regard. So very excited for everyone to get to take that in as part of the game day experience this year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, that Texas A&M game is going to be probably still pretty hot and steamy in September. The home slate this year really is like night and day compared to
Oh,
2024. There's a lot of exciting home games. Like Boise State is Notre Dame announced that's going to be the Irish wear green game this year.
yes. How do you feel about that,
USC
by
at
the way,
home.
Jess? I saw a lot of people
Yeah.
pushing back on not being against USC, which could be the last home game in that series. People have strong feelings about that. Notre Dame's done it for them in the past. Where were you at on that announcement versus it being USC?
I get the history behind the green jerseys and USC. I don't really like I don't know. I mean, there doesn't bother me at all. It's not something I would get upset about. Like you can also wear green to the USC game. They're just probably going to wear their regular home jerseys. What is your thought on it? Like does it matter to you that much?
No, like my thought, and listen, I don't want to say this to slight Boise State because even without Ashton Genty, that is still one of the premier G6 programs, absolutely a
Oh
team
yeah.
that could come in and upset the apple cart. We've seen that happen plenty, but in general, like I was always a fan of the green jerseys being a winnable game. Like that was just kind of
Well, now you've jinxed us.
yeah, no, exactly. Well, that's why I don't want to say it out loud. So
Well,
just
but
cut
Mike,
that, strike that, reverse
Notre
it,
Dame Notre Dame did wear the green jerseys for the Ohio State game 2 years
which
ago,
was sick.
which was awesome, and they were, of course, like 1 second away, 1 yard away from winning that game. I mean, I've done, like, deep dives on the green jerseys in the past. We sort of, like, remember the bad green jersey games more than we remember the blowout green jersey games, like,
Sure.
2018, I think, was a green jersey game against Florida State. Could have been, Ian Book was out, could have been a big upset at home. We beat Florida State by, like, 40 points in that game. Yes, I used we. I can't help myself. So
Oh
anyways,
yeah.
like we sort of like the record in the green jerseys isn't as bad as some people think. And to your point, yeah, it seems like Notre Dame's been wearing them against more um I don't know. I was gonna say against maybe easier opponents, but that's not true because of the Ohio State example that I just gave.
Yeah.
So
It
yeah,
was a
I
lot
I
of
don't
it was a
know.
lot of like the end of my time and beyond where they would basically wear them in like a lot of the service academy games or they do some green alternate for the Shamrock series
Yeah.
games when they were divvying up the helmet. But you're right. And Marcus Freeman has put a lot of this in the hand of his seniors. Like technically, we don't know if they're actually going to wear green in that game yet. Marcus says he leaves it up to the seniors and the captains to actually decide that, even though it's the fan game there. But it definitely adds an extra layer of juice. It's what they've always supposed to have been about for the history of that game. And I don't know about you, Jess, in the history of the green jerseys, the Ohio State green all greens were close to being my favorites. But then I
Mm.
saw a picture of the Brady Quinn era Bush Push game greens with the gold numbers on them and instantly remembered why those are my number one greens of all time.
Yeah, those are definitely my number one. I mean, the Joe Montana green also with the yellow lettering, I think is
Oh yeah.
obviously a classic, the 77 season. But like jerseys just don't look like that anymore. Like I don't think you can replicate that. I think the Ohio State green on green was nice. I didn't really like the green on white that Notre Dame wore against Louisville last year.
Yeah.
That was their green jersey game last year. But like I honestly think like I could be making this up. I think the biggest thing that Notre Dame looks at when they decide the green jersey game is what will the weather be? Because if it's in October and you make that the green jersey game and everyone has to wear their parkas, the stadium's not going to be green. So I wonder if that plays into it at all.
It honestly should. That's a great call for a stadium that already, because of the amount of colors that Notre Dame has to represent it,
Yes.
makes for a really complicated visual. Like so many other places, you have one color that populates the stadium, and it's pretty easy to create that atmosphere. Notre Dame always, the TV shot is this weird patchwork outside of the student section that's got the shirt on for that color that year,
Yeah.
which the shirt is that Brady Quinn era
Yes.
green this year, right? Which has a
It's
lot
like
of people wondering.
the forest green, yeah, which is very in right now, very in color. Also, Boise State is October 4th, USC is October 18th. That
Mm.
may seem like, what's the difference? It's 2 weeks. If you've ever lived in South Bend, you
Yeah.
know that the difference between October 4th and October 18th could be catastrophic weather-wise. It could be the difference between wearing shorts and it snowing. So I think maybe that might be it's the second third home game is the Boise State game, and it's a big game. Like you said, they were a playoff team last year, so I have no issues with it.
No, I agree. So that's going to be exciting. To your point, the real ones who listen to this podcast, I sure are all very aware of how much a difference 2 weeks in South Bend makes. That's why we appreciate everyone who tunes into this. So, all right, Jess, with all that big news around the jerseys and the booze in mind, let's talk about who is going to be throwing passes on the field for Notre Dame when either the green jerseys are donned or the beers are flowing in the stands. We're now, 3 practices into fall camp as we record this podcast for Notre Dame. It sounds like the quarterback competition is still a 50-50 split in terms of reps between Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr. We had the one practice at the beginning that was open to the public and open to the media, so a lot of the reactions were drawn from that. But Jess, there was a 4-interception day from the Notre Dame quarterback conversation that prompted the
Whoopsies.
quote from Mike Denbrock that everyone is sort of latched onto, which is, quote, "They both had their moments of catastrophic decision making, but I think what you saw was resiliency, which you love in a quarterback." So what have you made so far of the practice reports we've seen out of these guys? Is there anything to really take from this early into the competition?
I mean, I think yes and no. I think you could take some things away from it, which is that, Kenny Minchey was taking first team snaps on Thursday in front of the media, which I think could be a little bit of like Notre Dame playing mind games with fans and with media, saying like, this is a real quarterback competition. CJ Carr, if he was taking first team snaps Thursday first thing, maybe we're all reading into that a lot. But now that we see Minchey out there with, Malachi Fields and Jordan Faison and Jane Greathouse throwing to them and Eli Reardon, like that's, that shows us that they are taking it seriously as a 50-50 split. And it's not just lip service when Denbrock and Gino Guidugli are both saying it's 50-50 in their press conferences afterwards. So maybe you read into that as like, yeah, okay, like this is actually a real quarterback competition. It's not, made up. I think you and I are going to trauma bond over some maybe more interesting previous quarterback competitions during your time at ND in a little bit here. But as far as like the interceptions go, I mean, there's good interceptions and bad interceptions, right? Like if you want to look deeply into it, and from what I read from Pete Sampson from The Athletic and some of the Irish Sports Daily reporters that were there in person, a couple of them that CJ Carr threw were just like really great plays by the DBs. So then if you want to reach a lot into it, you could be like, maybe the quarterbacks are not that great, or maybe we just have the best DBs in the entire planet, Mike. They are so good. No one is going to throw a pass against them. But I don't know. I think, you got to take it with a grain of salt. It's still the third day of camp, like you said. And this is the time where, like both offensive coaches said, it's good to make the mistakes now. Like this is actually how you learn. You're not going to come in and be perfect from day one. You need to actually get this out of your system and learn from it and move on.
Yeah, that's, I think, been the biggest fight that a lot of people have had with training camp in general. Like we see this happen in the NFL all the time where there's a lot more access. People will keep sideline statistics as they watch practice, not knowing, hey, what's the goal of each period? What's the structure of this? Who was supposed to be where exactly on a lot of this? That's why Marcus Freeman, I thought, did a good job setting the table on that and being pretty deferential after that first practice where he's like, I haven't watched the tape and talked to them to see like where exactly we were trying to go with that period. And yeah, you want guys to try and take chances. You want them to work fearlessly and try and see what they can pull off and accomplish as this offense figures out what it's going to be in 2025. I don't want these guys playing cautiously and trying to check everything down because they're worried about throwing a few interceptions in camp. Even with these guys in competition, you want them playing fearlessly so that this offense can fully explore the depth and breadth of what it's going to be as a passing attack. We feel like we've got a decent idea of what the running game is going to look like that we can get to with that room. But as far as the passing attack that a lot of people want to see take a step forward this season, you need stuff like that to happen for both of these guys. So that doesn't really worry me in the slightest. They came out and said some of them were bad decisions made by the guys. Once they had watched the tape and seen that, they were fine admitting it. But for the rest of us, like, you got to kind of pump the brakes in terms of the sky is falling with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love Denbrock. He's like the most guys being dudes offensive coordinator. He's like, they both had their moments of catastrophic decision making, but like he just is like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, but it's okay that this happens. This is what practice is for.
I cannot stress how cool Coach Denbrock is. He is one of the amount of strong daps for Coach Denbrock when he was out, because him and Marcus Freeman were kind enough to show up to the charity golf tournament we put on in South Bend in the summer, and the amount of strong former player daps for Mike Denbrock coming back, who was the tight ends coach when I was there in school, has had multiple stints with Notre Dame. Like he is truly an ultimate vibes guy, and I think for him and Coach Guidugli, just such a great force for this young quarterback room. Because just to your point, like this is something we haven't seen in the Freeman era yet, is coming into a true competition. We did this all the time when Brian Kelly was on campus in terms of having guys going into the fall as a quarterback competition, using multiple quarterbacks throughout the season. But for the last couple of years, yeah, there was some competition, but we figured Sam Hartman was eventually going to win out because of all the experience 2 years ago. Riley Leonard last year, there were really no bones about it. And so this is sort of a first for this staff. And I think those two coaches in particular, being the ones in these quarterbacks' ear along with the rest of the offensive roster, give them a really good chance to develop as well as possible.
Right. And first for the staff is, I think, interesting and maybe something that could cause a little bit of concern, because like this is something that Notre Dame fans are very used to, at least became very used to in the Brian Kelly era, where there was a lot of quarterback battling happening. And for a number of reasons, like you said, like with the portal and like the quarterback transfers Notre Dame's had over the last like 4 or 5 years, we haven't really had to deal with this as much as fans. But like you said, Denbrock was there during some of those battles in your time. So he's certainly not new to it. And so like you sort of have to just have faith as a fan that they you trust them and trust what they know what they're looking for. So I wanted to ask you, when you were a player, obviously we talked about your buddy Dane Christ last week, who was a big time recruit at Notre Dame. Tommy Rees, also a person that Notre Dame fans are intimately familiar with over his time as both the quarterback and the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for the Irish. But what do you remember from some of those memorable preseason camp quarterback battles? There was obviously 2011, which was ended up being a catastrophic season opener against USF, to steal Denbrock's word. You have 2012, which ended up being a great season, but going into the season, there were a lot of question marks about if Tommy Rees was going to play, if Everett Golson was going to play. And then after your time at ND, we've had so many of these quarterback competitions, including, the catastrophic 2016 season where there was not a quarterback named in the preseason. So like take us back and let's remember some of these terrible times.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, like how not terrible they felt in real time, and I think part of that comes with, at that point, we, in a lot of those, especially when it was Dane and Tommy or when it was Tommy and Everett, we had a lot of time under task with those guys. Like we knew what each of them was about, and so you felt really comfortable no matter who was out on the field. It was just, there are little differences with each guy that, speaking for like the offensive linemen right now, where, that group had a little bit of a shakeup, but seems pretty comfortable with who their best five are right now. And in terms of how that affects them or how that affects the running back group, like you just sort of have the little idiosyncrasies that for each guy. Like, all right, in 2012, we knew when Everett was in, hey, you're going to have to hold blocks for a really long time because he might be able to buy time and make a big play, make something happen. He's got that kind of extra game breaker ability. Versus Tommy, as soon as he walked into the huddle, you were like, all right, I don't have to worry as much about helping the quarterback identify certain things. Like he was going to have the check down, he was going to have us in the right play, he was going to be where he was supposed to be launch point wise in the pocket. And so you always kind of knew where Tommy was going to be, but you knew, hey, not going to work his way out of a sack. Maybe he doesn't have the arm to get it in certain places, but like overall, both guys you felt like you could depend on in different ways. And so for everyone else, that's really the extent of how it affects it there. And because you've got that built up trust. And again, I think that's what's interesting about both of these guys being players that were on the roster last year in CJ's case, the last couple of years for Kenny's phase is these guys know them. And so it's not like you're trying to come in and learn a quarterback that's portaled in. You've got that familiarity. And so I think it's a lot easier on them for the relationship in the room to go and make this a thing that's not weird. And also for the rest of the team to look at this and just be able to say, all right, hey, we don't care. We know both of these guys. We appreciate what they've done for the team. Let's just let them sort out who's the best and go out from there.
Yeah, I think what's different about this too is that, in a lot of the more recent examples, just going back like the last 10 or 15 years, a lot of the quarterback battles have been between someone who's, started a bunch of games
Yeah.
and their competition is coming back from an injury like Malik Zaire and Deshaun Kaiser, or, someone like whenever Golson came back from his suspension, he had obviously played a full season in 2012. He missed a couple games, but played most of the season against Malik, who was a redshirt freshman, I think. So like there was not a lot of competition between two players who hadn't started a game before. And that's what I think that means this leaves this more like open-ended where it really could be anything. And I think right now, just the only thing that's setting the two apart is, they play a little bit differently. Like
Sure.
Minchey's got more legs, and Denbrock has obviously coached a number of really elite quarterbacks with that skill set. So maybe that sets him apart, and maybe that will give him a different out against certain defenses, and maybe that will impact who starts in week 1 versus who may end up playing later in the season. That's always something that we've seen before with Brandon Wimbush and Ian Book even, although not the ideal. You'd rather just sort of have a starter, I think, that plays the whole season and keeps getting better week over week. But could you see something like that happening with these two guys?
Yeah, I think we certainly can't rule it out because this is such a different way. And it's no doubt a risk, right? I've talked to other college football analysts who are like, hey, listen, programs like Ohio State, programs like Notre Dame in this day and age where you can go get someone who's got college tape opting for guys that don't, it is certainly a risk. And so how they want to handle and explore that could absolutely mean guys being used in different ways throughout the season, to your point, especially when they've got slightly differing skill sets that could offer you some support. But I think the mentality for this team, and it was kind of similar to the mentality in 2012 when we looked at the roster, was, hey, we feel like we're good enough in a lot of other areas to where whoever's back there, we're going to make it work. For this Notre Dame team, with the talent they bring back defensively and offensively around whoever the quarterback is, I'm sure the rest of those guys are saying, hey, we'll be able to offset this. We'll be able to lead on our side while we get the quarterback up to speed, whoever ends up under center in South Bend. So that certainly, Jess, could be a good point to take a quick pause here and come back and look at what we've heard and seen from the rest of this roster so far through camp. That's next here on The Echoes.
Welcome back to the Echoes podcast. I'm Jessica Smetana. He's Mike Golic Jr. Thanks for listening along. Like, rate, subscribe, review, tell all your friends. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Mike, I wanted to give you the sort of pessimist case for Notre Dame this season because we just talked about the quarterback position, and like it's very true that I think the expectation level is hard to set when we don't really know who the quarterback is or what the quarterback ceiling is, but we have, expectations that it will be pretty high just based off of what we've seen so far. But let's say that neither quarterback is really great and stands out. Is that something that we should be concerned with? I would say, given the rest of what we have on offense, specifically the running back room, it still makes me feel pretty good. So like going into week 1, I think a lot of fans are nervous because, it's going to be a first start for one of these quarterbacks. But when you look around, even in a pessimistic view of like what we have on the rest of this team, it's still pretty damn good. And in a lot of cases, it's better than last year. So I'm looking at camp reports of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price running in two back sets on the offense. I'm seeing that Jeremiah Love is playing a little bit of receiver. That sort of opens things up in an interesting way. Notre Dame didn't do a lot of that with him last year. Obviously, we're still seeing reports of great tight end play from Raridan, from the transfer Ty Washington, who came over from Arkansas. I saw a good story about him in Irish Sports Daily, talking about like his mental health struggles last year and sort of how he ended up back at Notre Dame. So certainly rooting for him. But I think my question for you is like, am I crazy for that? Like, if you take a pessimistic view of the quarterback position, like there's still a lot here, right?
Yeah, like in a world where what if the Notre Dame quarterback play is just average this season?
Right. Or like, what if
What
it stinks a little?
if it stinks a little, that could be pretty interesting. But to your point, Jess, the expectations sky high. The coaches poll came out. Notre Dame preseason fifth in the coaches poll behind Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, and Georgia, two teams that they did beat last year en route to the playoff championship appearance against Ohio State, who checks in at number two. And yeah, I think that's the reason, quite honestly, I've been so bullish on Notre Dame in a way that's been atypical for me in my lifetime, is just you saw so many of the strengths of this roster shine through in critical stretches last year when they were banged up and beat up and young guys were getting valuable snaps. And like, I think that's given me a lot of hope. The depth of the running back room, I truly like. Coach Sider came over from Penn State talking about how unique it is that all these guys came back and were big high profile recruits that could have gone and chased the bag elsewhere. Notre Dame's four deep at running back with guys that it sounds like, based on what coach has said, will play. And so what that looks like, to your point, the two back stuff is enticing. It sounds like Jadarian and J Love have been pushing for that a little bit. Like, their creative ways to get their best players the ball. We saw that last year, right? From Coach Denbrock, who wasn't afraid to platoon different units to try and go do different things out on the field, even early in the season, as they were kind of learning their quarterback. I think is, yeah, absolutely. Like, the floor is raised again significantly in a way that we saw in the Brian Kelly era and now seems to have inched even a little further because of how much depth there's been across the board in terms of the talent. And the running back room is kind of a microcosm of that team wide.
Yeah, like that little like Jeremiah Love screen pass, I think it was a touchdown against Louisville last season, was like that was nice, like getting him set up in that play. But what if we put him downfield a little bit, Mike? What if we like use his freak abilities a little bit more downfield and let him beat the second line of defense, not just have to like go through the first, because we saw him against Penn State, right? Like he blew through like four tackles to score that touchdown.
Oh,
Just
I'll watch
absolute
I'll
freak
watch that clip
touchdown.
every week for the rest of my life. Thank you so
So
much, Jeremiah, for saving me.
I'm with you though. Like I think Jalen Sider comes very highly touted from Penn State, and that's like another team with a great running back room coming back this season, and they're getting all of the credit for having what looks like one of the best running back rooms in college football. But I mean, like you said, Jadarian Price has proven it. Like he's really speedy. He's really fast. He's good at breaking tackles. He can play any down. Jeremiah Love is he's a freak. Like he's a freak athlete and one of the better running backs I think of our lifetime at Notre Dame, which is there's a lot of really good ones, Mike. I mean, who do you put him up against?
A freak that's not on the freaks list, by the way. The Bruce Feldman
Yes.
freaks list came out and no J Love represented there. Notre Dame has Bryce Young and Eli Raridan that checked in on the list, which just maybe spin zone. The fact that Notre Dame's roster has two guys that, one in Bryce that played a bunch. I mean, they've both played a bunch, but that are
Mhm.
breakout candidates for us and a lot of people. They're on the list over J Love, which must mean we're stacked, or that,
Yeah, well,
Jeremiah Love wasn't doing a lot of the testing stuff during the offseason. I saw Pete
right.
Sampson brought that up, which I thought was noteworthy because this is a list about who runs the fastest, lifts the most, jumps the highest, etc.
Okay, well, I have seen Jeremiah Love jump very high when he's hurdling actual human beings during football games. So can we get someone with, like one of those like sports scientists to do a little like diagram and be like, look at how high he jumped. This is like the equivalent of this and that in, underwear Olympics terms. So not on the freaks list. That's okay. We'll
No,
we'll we'll move on. But yeah, I mean
but
Aeneas Williams is go ahead.
well, I was to say, in terms of like the best running backs, like
Oh
where
yeah.
where does Jeremiah Love fit in the conversation around best, most talented, however you want to do it, because production wise, he's going to be a 3-and-out guy. He's in a loaded backfield that meant he doesn't have to take an inordinate amount of touches, which is great for his NFL career, right? That he's going to walk into the league with really 2 years as the full-time starter, but in backfields where he had Jadarian last year, Kedron Young, who's there now, seems like a horse who's going to see the field as well. Like, all of those are going to mean he's got fewer touches and ultimately won't climb like the top 10 all-time rushing list at Notre Dame. Autry Denson, number 1 with over 4,300 yards. Alan Pinkett, number 2 with over 4,100. And then Vegas Ferguson. And then we start to get to the people from this century or this millennium of Notre Dame football in the 21st century. Darius Walker checking in at number 4 with just over 3,200 yards. And Josh Adams, that was the one that caught me by surprise, with 3,198 yards, is top 5 all-time in Notre Dame history. Like, Audric Estime is in the top 10, but no Kyron Williams in that group unless you just make it about the 21st century running back. So that one surprised me a bit, Jess. There's a lot of production in there before we look at the talent of that, which jumped off the page to me.
Yeah, I mean, Kyron Williams is the interesting one as just this guy who's in the league right now making plays at that position. But he also finished his career with 700 receptions at Notre Dame, which is sort of a little bit of a different skill set. And he was picking up blitzes left and right, which was awesome. But yeah, I mean, Darius Walker, I think is a fun comparison. Like, when I hear the name Darius Walker, I hear the Notre Dame former PA announcer, I think Michael Collins was his name, just over the intercom saying, Darius Walker, because he would just get the ball and run and get the ball and run and get the ball and run. Like, every single game, he was just such a reliable back. And I know one of your favorites as well.
Yeah, this is where I have to. I think it's time for me to embarrass myself. Jess knows this story, but for the people that listen to this podcast, I always stress I am a lot more like the average Notre Dame fan than I get credit for in terms of my brain chemistry. Like, yes, I was fortunate to go play there and I enjoyed the experience, but at my core, I am a sick and twisted Notre Dame fan. So much so I'm sure, like a bunch of Notre Dame fans, I grew up Catholic. And one of the sacraments of Catholicism is confirmation, when it's the rite of passage when you're becoming a teenager, where you confirm your faith in Christ. And as a part of that, you've got to pick a saint's name as your confirmation name. So, technically, your full name would be Michael Lewis blank Golic, with that confirmation name wedged in there. My confirmation name was Darius. I went and found a Saint Darius because at that point in time, I was so enamored with Darius Walker and what he was doing for those Notre Dame teams of the early aughts that I thought, I must make this man a part of my life forever. So my full name in Catholicism is Michael Lewis Darius Golic. And it is so awkward now, Jess, because I got to work with Darius last year in TNT calling games in the Mountain West. And I'm sitting there on a Zoom call where I talked to him and got to work with him, having to know in my heart I have this secret that I can never tell him, that he might see by way of this podcast now, and that I have to carry with me to my grave.
Mike, I love it. And it honestly makes me feel ashamed. Like, I'm a bad Notre Dame fan, because I could have made my confirmation name Jeff or Zibby. I could have found a Saint Zibby. What was I thinking? I think you're just a better fan than all of us. We were all slacking off.
I had to raise the bar for fandom there. So obviously I am going to be a little bit biased when it comes to Darius, given that he is part of my namesake. But Jess, I thought the really interesting part of looking at this walk down the memory lane and why Jeremiyah, you're right. I think Kyron Williams, when I look at the 21st century Notre Dame running backs outside of my former teammates, I love all of those guys and what they were able to do at Notre Dame. But Theo Riddick, one of my favorite dudes ever. Really, Theo Riddick, yeah. I have such a vivid memory of, I think we were playing BYU, of pulling around on a power and being underneath a pile of people and just hearing the PA announcers going nuts in the stadium rising up and looking up from the bottom of the pile and seeing Theo streaking down the field. Wasn't the fastest guy, but had a crazy juke in the hole and was just an all-time dude. Obviously personal bias aside, Kyron Williams is my favorite running back of the 21st century for Notre Dame. And it's because I'm a sucker for pass protection. That Clemson game is one of my favorite performances by a college football player ever. Just a blitz pickup all-star. But he was a 5th round draft pick. And Audric, who was great and an absolute bowling ball and is, I think, top 5 in touchdowns, rushing touchdowns all time for Notre Dame, 5th round draft pick. The highest ranked draft pick of the Notre Dame running back since the year 2000 was Julius Jones. He was a second round draft pick for Notre Dame. Everybody else, Audric Estime and Kyron were the next closest as fifth rounders, but Darius Walker, Josh Adams, Sierra Wood, Ryan Grant, and Armando Allen, all in the top 10 for rushers in the 2000s for Notre Dame, all of them undrafted free agents in the NFL. Like Jeremiyah Love, barring something unforeseen, is going to be likely the top running back off the board and a first-round pick this year. So talent-wise, and, he was a high-profile recruit, top 5 in his position, he's the best of what we've had in my lifetime.
Yeah, and Kyron Williams should have been drafted higher is my other takeaway from this because, underwear Olympics don't tell the full story. Amen. Watch the Clemson game. How did he fall in the 5th round? How did the Rams how did we let McVay get Kyron Williams? It makes me so upset. Anyways, Mike, I'm with you. I'm very high on this room. I'm excited to see how the different running back position is used this year with a different position coach. I mean, it's going to be different. It should be interesting. I love that we have, all these younger players, like you mentioned, Kedron Young, Bron Payne is coming back off of an ACL last spring, I believe. So there's a lot of depth.
Aeneas Williams, who was another pass protection marvel as a freshman last year, which is nuts.
A couple of huge receptions in the playoffs. Do you make it to the national championship without Aeneas Williams? I don't know. He came up very clutch for Notre Dame down the stretch there. So definitely interested to see how that group improves over the season. But the other big position battle going on right now is in the safety room with the emergence of Tay Bronte Johnson, who apparently had a great first day of camp in front of the media. We all know Xavier Watts has moved on to the professionals. It's very sad, Mike. I'm going to miss him so much. He's one of my favorite defensive players, probably since Manti Te'o's 2012 season, just as in terms of like a ball hawk who is always making a play. He's everywhere at once. It's going to be really tough to replace him. And also, can you even replace him? You're not going to replace it, right?
No, absolutely not. And having a Don Schuler back there helps as the returning starter in that room. He seems to want to pick up a lot of that slack. But in terms of that production, no. Jess, we cannot expect one person to offset this. And so it's going to be about the whole. And to your point, we've got a bunch of guys that seem like they can contribute right now. Luke Talich coming out of spring football was a big story, a former 3-star who was a walk-on at Notre Dame who earned a scholarship out of Texas. Jadon Blair was the 5th-ranked player out of North Carolina in this last class, who's a true freshman who just tall defensive back room, 6'5" safety, which is kind of a throwback. This tends to be cyclical in sports and in football in general, but having taller defensive backs, these rangy bodies in there. And then Jalen Stroman, who's the Virginia Tech transfer, who started 9 games, doesn't have any career interceptions, but would be the experienced player. Notre Dame has portaled a bunch of safeties from other schools traditionally under Marcus Freeman that have come in and been productive. So with all those guys there, Tay seems like the one that, especially because he did it while the media was watching, has a lot of people circling him as could be that big playmaker. They said he could play any position in the defensive back room. Marcus said he thinks he's the best DB and wide receiver on the team, which is peak defensive back. I want that mentality on the field as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Luke Talich had the big pick 6 against Florida State last year. So he's definitely gotten a lot of experience. I've seen speculation that he is a little bit bigger. Maybe him and Schuler sort of are very similar and end up sort of being better at that, strong safety position. And then Tay Johnson could come in and be more of the free safety because he's a little bit more athletic, speedy, can change direction better. So that's certainly possible. Stroman, I think, is kind of the wild card. He didn't play last season for Virginia Tech because he was hurt. So he has a lot of playing experience. He played, I think, 3 seasons before his injury, contributed for the Hokies. So I'm not really sure exactly where he fits in, but then Notre Dame also had Devonta Smith transfer from Alabama to play that nickel position. So it seems best case scenario with all of this is that you've got a lot of options. And so you can change it, every week you're going to get a different scout. You're going to be playing against a different offense with different players, and there's going to be different matchups. And if you have the ability to trade, switch these guys around and have depth in that position, that's super helpful. And I feel like this is one position group where maybe going into spring, fans were it's going to be tough to replace Xavier Watts. It's going to be tough to replace replace Benjamin Morrison, who we barely even talked about because he missed half of last season, but he's gone too. He was a humongously talented player the first half of last season before he got hurt. But I think you kind of just have faith in Marcus Freeman at this point, that like, and Mike Mickens, that like they're gonna do right by this and they're gonna figure it out, and like it's hard to pass on this team.
Mike Mickens, who I think is getting inducted into the Cincinnati Athletics Hall of Fame. So congratulations to him.
I think he's their all-time interceptions leader. He had 14 interceptions at Cincinnati, which is a lot of interceptions.
I would say more than Xavier Watts had at Notre Dame in his 2 seasons, 13 as one of the best in recent history. But Jess, I don't, and like, the fact that this is one of the biggest talking points early in training camp, to me, is the defining trait so far of Marcus Freeman's on-field impact in Notre Dame, in terms of like, what is the big difference in terms of what or how they've recruited. People point to the overall ratings, but to me, it's the fact that we're talking about defensive back at Notre Dame as potentially, like, maybe outside of offensive line and running back, as the deepest, most talented room. You and I both watched Notre Dame football for, the majority of the last, 20, 30 years. Like, that has never been the case when we've looked at a lot of these rosters. And so the fact that they very quickly flipped the script on how that position room is perceived and how they execute is, to me, a direct reflection of Marcus Freeman and Coach Mickens and the job they've done.
For sure, Mike. There's been players here and there, right? Like Kavari Russell or Julian Love, or like there's been a really great defensive back player on this team, but then like the rest of it is a little leaky. Or there's been games where, I mean, even going back to like the Weiss era, where you're just like, we can't, like, this team can't tackle. Like, this is bad. The tackling is not where it needs to be right now. And that's sort of like a thing that you like you said, over the last few seasons. It's just you trust it, and it just opens up the rest of the defense to really wreak havoc when you can trust Leonard Moore to chase down, Louisville's quarterback and punch the ball out of his hand if he gets past the linebackers. Like, that's pretty special.
Oh, you're right. And part of it is the fact that, like, Leonard Moore, we got so much of that freshman All-American experience last year when Ben went down. It was one of the silver linings of a really unfortunate injury. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think what they afford the rest of this team to do. Chris Ash talking about some of the differences already in the defense this year, where, hey, last year we were defensive tackle led and we played a ton of man coverage. It's like, we can probably mix a little zone in now, because it sounds like coming off spring, they're pretty confident we can take Bryce Young, we can take Boubacar Traore and line these guys up wider and let them cook off the edge in a way that hasn't been Notre Dame's strong suit for a few years now, but seems to be like one of the material differences that we can look at this year. And so that, to me, like, all those little differences highlight a huge area of the roster that they've managed to overhaul.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about like top first round running back talent, like another thing that Notre Dame hasn't had in the last few years is like the first round defensive end talent, right?
Yep.
Like that's something that all of the best college football teams have. Like all of the freak defenses in college football have those dudes. And Notre Dame was a top 5 defense last year, really without a lot of that production. And a lot of that's owing to injury, sure. But you need that position to really wreak havoc. You need to be able to put pressure on Carson Beck in week 1. You need to be able to get to the quarterback and to apply pressure and make them make mistakes and throw interceptions. That's part of the recipe, Mike, to a very tasty and delicious college football season. So before we move on, anything else from camp reports that you want to cover?
No, I'd say the last real big one that I saw, Marcus Freeman did come out and talk about a couple of the injured players in Charles Jagusah and Cooper Flanagan at tight end. Said he expects them both back this season. Hasn't put a timetable on that. Marcus Freeman, which we didn't get to talk about this ever, Jess, but it came out and said his reaction to the Charles Jagusah injury, and said it was devastation for the young man. The first reaction isn't the team. It's not, oh my God, we lost our starting guard. It's that I care for the person that's gone through a lot. You talk about what he went through last year with the pec injury, now dealing with this. Once I knew he was okay, I wanted to know what happened and how it happened, and mentioned it was a group of 10 to 15 players. They were together. That's what you want. I would feel worse if it was a single guy. And it was a reminder of why Marcus Freeman is as beloved by the players and has been a good a leader as he has been, is because he understands that, where we had a lot of the online and message board crowd calling Charles Jagusah selfish, wanting to see players fined for things like this. Marcus Freeman said, I don't want these guys to not go and have fun and do this together and build that off-field camaraderie. And I thought that was refreshing support for this player and the absolute right take on this situation, regardless of what anyone else has had to say.
Yeah, I just love like not throwing a guy who's hurting under the bus in front of the media and embarrassing him. That would be something that I wouldn't enjoy a head coach doing, and I have never seen a Notre Dame head coach do that before, luckily. So, anyways, moving on, Mike. When we come back from the break, we'll finish things up here on the Echoes.
All right, welcome back to the Echoes. Follow us at the Echoes ND Pod wherever you're at on social media. The TikTok's been going crazy. Jess going to be doing some fun stuff over there as we get going. Well known for the lists over at the Levitard Show. So, Jess, I imagine a few of those going to make that way over to our TikTok.
Mike, I am a sicko, and I was thinking a fun TikTok would be like top 5 worst games of Brian Kelly's Notre Dame career. And then I wrote down like 10 possible games, and I don't know if I can whittle it down to 5. Because then it's like, is it bad because it's a team that Notre Dame should have beat? Or is it bad because it was the most lopsided national championship game up until TCU Georgia? Like, I don't know how to, there's so many options.
The national title can't be in there. We're the national championship, Jack. Like,
but it was
the last game. How is that one of the 10 worst?
It was embarrassing.
Yeah, I know that part sucked, but we lost to Tulsa at home.
Yeah, but Tulsa,
those aren't even in the same tax bracket.
Tulsa was like decent that year. I don't know. UConn was worse than Tulsa. See, there's a lot to debate here. Navy was worse than all of
wasn't
the
a Brian Kelly era one though. That was UConn
you're right.
Charlie.
You're right. That was the
6 and 6 worst
year,
losses
right?
of my Notre Dame career were, I think, Syracuse and UConn. My freshman and sophomore years on senior day. Syracuse, the infamous student section snowball game that I still have not gotten over, and UConn being from Connecticut made it nearly impossible for me to go back to my home state and hold my head up high. So those are nightmares for me. But yes, that'd be great content.
I was at like a senior night. I think it was senior night loss to BYU where it was 9 degrees in 2014, I want to say. Okay, but then here's my other thing. Where do I put 2014 FSU as like terrible loss? Because it's not like embarrassing, but it was like if I wasn't a football fan after that day, like I think people would understand that. You know, if I like came out the other side of that and was like, I'm done with this, people would be like, yeah,
that should be in the top 5, Jess, because it's one of those where I remember exactly where I was. I was on Long Island. Shout out to my former freshman year roommate and Notre Dame lacrosse star, Sean Rogers. I was at his parents' house watching that game and dropped to my knees in their living room. Literally, like not the meme. I dropped to my knees when I saw that flag down on the goal line for offensive pass interference and have never fully recovered. Yeah. So that is top 5 for me.
Okay.
Easy.
I have an idea. I'll do top 5 most heartbreaking losses of the Brian Kelly era, and then I'll do top 5 worst losses. And those are 2 different lists, and I will post them on the Echoes TikTok account. How about that?
All right, that sounds like a great plan. So again, at the Echoes ND Pod, I think the Echoes on TikTok should just be where you find it. I'm such a boomer right now, struggling with that concept, but
that's fine.
Yeah, go check it out there.
People
it's
will
going to be
great.
Speaking of content, Jess, let me make myself sound way less old.
You're having a Golic Sr. moment.
Really,
don't tell him
I said that. Me more and more every day. Clip that for Dad. The college football coaches poll came out while we were recording this show, and we mentioned before Notre Dame in the top 5, but wanted to look at this through the lens of Notre Dame's schedule, Jess. Notre Dame begins the season with 3 teams ranked in the top 25 of the coaches poll that are on their schedule for this year. Miami checking in at number 10, Texas A&M tied with Iowa State at 21, which feels weird, and then Boise State at number 25, last year's group of 6 champion that made the college football playoff. Any surprise, Jess, like USC, OLI on this list?
I'm not that surprised USC is not up on the list because they did finish 6-6 last season, which people forget. But no, I mean, I think, this is solid. Like Texas A&M was a team that had playoff potential going into that Texas game at the end of the Auburn game at the end of last season. They totally crapped the bed in that one. Miami is also a team that, and if they didn't give up a 21-point lead to Syracuse the last week of the season, they would have been in the playoffs. So these are all teams that finished. Obviously, Boise State was in the playoff. We all know that. These are all teams that finished really well last season. A bunch of them, returning quarterbacks for all 3 of them. So that helps with the rankings there. I think notably Notre Dame is number 5, and ahead of Notre Dame is Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, and Georgia. I think it's very notable that 3 of those 4 teams Notre Dame played against in the playoff, and they beat 2 of them. So I think Notre Dame's getting, a ton of credit going into the season. Obviously, last year Notre Dame was also ranked really high in the preseason poll. I think they were top 10, and I can't remember what I made, 6 or 7 maybe. And it seemed after week 1 like that was a totally appropriate ranking, and then after week 2 it did not seem that way. So you can't totally buy into the preseason polls because you never know what's going to happen, who the quarterback's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. But I think this is showing you, Notre Dame's getting the amount of respect commensurate with how they finished the season last year and how Marcus Freeman's just been doing generally. So, can't cry about number 5 in the coaches poll. I think that's pretty fair.
Yep. No, I think that works out pretty well. To your point, I know people often war against the preseason polls and that they do more harm than good in setting expectations. A lot of it's driven for TV just to make the ratings in the early season look good. But you can glass half full at Jess and say absolutely what you did there. Respect for last year, an acknowledgement of the roster that you've put together and what on paper looks like a team with the kind of talent that generally falls in this tax bracket. So certainly not mad at that there. Jess, we usually at the end of these podcasts shout out what's gone on for Notre Dame athletes in other sports, Irish in the pros, things like that. Do you have any of those there? I know we also have some comments from the ratings and reviews on our Apple Pods that we wanted to show some love to as well.
Yes. Okay. First thing, Sonia Citron had a really cool profile on her in Anscape. So check that out. She also had, I believe, 28 points in a game last week for the Mystics. So she's just the best, Mike. She's one of the best we've ever had, and I miss her so much. But yeah, all the ND Hoopers in the W having good weeks so far. I did want to read a comment from Kathleen Kiefer, who left a review on Apple for us. It was a very beautiful review, and she said in it, she is an artist, Mike. She annually is at your family's charity fundraiser with her art of Notre Dame. It's wonderful. My parents have several pieces in their house, including one of the grotto. I'll put it behind me on the next pod. Anyway, she said in her review, Mike, Jess and Mike inspire me to stay in the studio longer. We are inspiring art on this podcast. That is, I don't know if you can get a better review than that from anyone.
No, I don't think it's possible. Kathleen, yes, very clearly defined friend of the pod here, someone who's been great to us at the tournament and a wonderful artist. So if you're a Notre Dame fan who doesn't have any of her art in your home, go and change that quickly. And just know that a piece that you're getting could be something that we have in fact inspired, which is incredible.
I'm so flattered. And then there was another really nice review, Mike, from ND Irish 92, who said, it's great to have a podcast from ND alumni, and he appreciates us mentioning other sports and pros in their respective leagues. Also went on to say that he's got his own Notre Dame group text message where he trauma bonds with his friends. So really enjoy all the comments. Keep them coming. We'll read more of them. And it's been really fun doing the podcast so far. This is our 3rd episode. We're off next week on the 12th of August. We'll be back on the 19th. We may have a special guest with us, so stay tuned to see that. And so far so good, Mike. This has been a fun little preseason so far.
Oh, it's been fantastic. It's so much fun riding the emotional roller coaster with you of this, going through all the practice reports with all the Notre Dame fans. We want to keep hearing from you guys, more of your predictions for breakout players, who's impressed you in camp. Throw them in the YouTube comments, throw them in the podcast reviews. We'll get to them and read them here, maybe do a mailbag at some point at the end of one of these podcasts. So again, we'll miss you guys next week, but we'll be back chomping at the bit 2 weeks from now. Follow us everywhere, subscribe, rate, review. Thanks so much, and Jess, go Irish.
Go Irish.